Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rachel Belle. I host the podcast Your Last Meal through Cairo Radio, and I also am a feature reporter at Cairo Radio as well. So thank you so much for coming to the final installment of KCTS Nine's Food for Thought series, The Foods That Made Seattle. If you've been here for the other two, it's like a collector series. So I hope that you feel cool. We need like a passport stamp or something so that you can confirm that you've been to all three events. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that we're going to do a brief audience Q&A at the end of all the interviews. So make sure and type any questions you have, any comments into the chat, and we're going to be collecting those and we'll get to those at the end. So don't hold back. Ask all of the questions that you have. And also, we want to remind you that KCTS 9 is a nonprofit, and events like this are only possible because of your support. So thank you so much if you have made a donation in the past or maybe even today. And if you would like to become a member or make another donation, go to kcts9.org/support. That's kcts9.org/support. You're the one that makes these events possible, and we thank you so much. So let's get on with the show. We have so many people to talk to today. A super local show. We're talking about all of these foods that are so iconic in Seattle, and they range. I mean, they're all over the place. So I'm going to bring on Knute Berger. He is the host of Mossback Northwest on KCTS 9. Hi, Knute.
Hey, Rachel.
Virtual events, they're kind of weird. Hello. So you had done a program on this very topic, right, in the past, where you had looked at the histories and gone a little bit in depth on all of these different Seattle foods?
Yeah, we did an episode of foods that either originated in Seattle or were, made famous here in one way or another. And so we looked at the chicken teriyaki. We looked at the Dutch baby. Belgian waffles, which were connected with the Seattle World's Fair, the Seattle dog. Yeah, those were just a few of the things that we had fun kind of looking into the history of each of those things.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the history with you before we bring the others in. So I actually hadn't heard of the Belgian waffle, which is something we're not going to talk about today with the guests, but the location, the place is right in the name. How does that connect to Seattle?
Yeah, I know. So, a fellow from Belgium came over for the Seattle World's Fair, and he set up a Belgian waffle franchise. People here didn't know about Belgian waffles either. And they just became super popular. Of course, it didn't hurt that they ended up in a movie starring Elvis Presley.
But they were in that movie?
Yeah, the Belgian waffles were featured in one of the scenes. People just went nuts for them, and they calculated that if you stacked the Belgian waffles up that people had purchased at the World's Fair, it would have been as high as 7 Space Needles. Wow. And essentially, it was a very kind of light waffle. You smothered it with whipped cream and cherries. Not cherries, strawberries. And I had one as a kid at the World's Fair. It was delicious.
How old are you that you were at that World's Fair?
I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And then the Belgian waffles went to the New York World's Fair in 1964, and they became even more famous. But that was kind of, they got their start here in the United States. They got their start here in Seattle.
That's so interesting. And so kind of moving along to another food that has the name of another country in the name, kind of, the Dutch baby. I actually didn't know until recently that was a Seattle phenomenon as well. Can you explain the history behind that?
Yeah. So, growing up here, it's like everybody's mom had a recipe for Dutch babies. Families would have these things. And then you'd tell somebody new to town, we have Dutch babies on Sunday, and they're like, what the heck? It's basically sort of a deep dish popover, kind of between a popover, a pancake, and an omelet. It's usually cooked in an iron pot, and it's puffy and a little eggy, and you can eat it with, powdered sugar and syrup, or some people like them savory, or you could put lingonberries on. And, Germans, Scandinavians, lots of cultures have something similar to a Dutch baby. And it was brought to Seattle by a guy named Victor Manca, who had Monka's was a restaurant. It appeared in the 1890s. And the Dutch babies became super popular with people that were coming through town because of the gold rush. And so they'd come back from the Yukon and they would want, a hearty breakfast. And they were served individually in a iron skillet at your table. And they're very rich and they're really delicious. Getting that balance between the sort of puffy pastry and the kind of meaty egginess is kind of a critical thing to having a successful Dutch baby.
Yeah, it's almost like a souffle pancake omelet, but they are quite easy to make at home because when I've seen how you make the Dutch baby, you kind of just put everything in the blender if you want to, and then you just pour that whole batter in a pan. So maybe it's more about the technique of getting it to fluff up.
Yeah, I think it's all kind of in the technique and the oven temperature and that kind of thing. But even a failed Dutch baby is really good if you pour enough syrup on it.
That's true. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about that really fast. So later we're going to speak with Bob Donegan, who's president of Ivar Seafood Restaurants and Chowder. But of course, Ivar, the original owner, he was this huge character, and I've been reading about him the past few days. Can you tell the famous story about the syrup train?
Oh, well, that was a famous publicity stunt. Ivar was famous for kind of civic stunts of one kind or another. And a train derailed near Ivar's waterfront restaurant in Seattle, and it was full of Caro syrup, and Ivar immediately made a bunch of flapjacks, ran out there as the newspaper photographers were arriving for this train wreck, and he scooped the syrup up and put it on his pancakes, sitting in the middle of the street on a stool.
I love that story so much.
Yeah, it's classic Ivar. He was had started out as kind of a folk singer and ran a little seafood stand, turned it into kind of a it's still extremely popular restaurant chain, and he did a lot of things. There was a whimsical element that Seattleites really related to.
Yeah, and that picture I read was in newspapers around the world. It went viral for whatever year that was, like 1940s, 1950s.
That guy just had an instinct for how to get ink.
Yeah, and I can't remember which, I think his mom was Norwegian and his dad was Swedish. And I was thinking, everybody always has this stereotype. That's why Seattleites, there's the Seattle freeze, and that's why people keep to themselves. And I thought, no way, dude. This guy, Ivar, he was like the mix of these two allegedly shy, quiet Scandinavian cultures. And he was a really big personality. So I don't think we have any excuse for the Seattle freeze if we compare ourselves to Ivar.
He was not a freezer.
Oh, so for you, when you think of the iconic Seattle food, just what resonates with you most? What do you think of as the most Seattle food, or the most Seattle food that you love the best?
Oh, well, the food thing is interesting because there's dishes like we've been talking about, but there's also ingredients. And, I just don't think you can get past seafood. And I think the most iconic, and I'll put salmon aside, are Olympia oysters, which is the only native oyster in the region. Hugely popular, big part of the original seafood industry here, and Dungeness crab. And Seattle is one of 3 cities or 4 cities that sort of claim to have originated the crab Louis. And one of the reasons was that we had access to this amazing crab very close by, and in the days before refrigeration and that kind of thing, Seattle was the place where you could get the absolute best, freshest seafood. And we really made hay with that, even in the early days of the city.
I want you to tell a story before we move on to our next guest about you got to be with your 2-year-old granddaughter when she had her first oyster. Can you talk about that experience? Because, I mean, that is so Pacific Northwest that toddlers
Yeah.
are eating oysters, something that's hard to get a lot of adults to eat.
There's that thing, that sort of sense of baptizing people in the Northwest. I had a colleague some years ago who they had a place over on Hood Canal, and they would take each newborn and dip them in Puget Sound at a very
I thought you were
early
going to say
age.
dip them in butter.
Yeah, the yeah, with my granddaughter, we actually had a big family dinner at Ivar's, and introduced her to her first raw oyster, and she liked it, which was different from my reaction the first time I had a raw oyster. I was with a Norwegian uncle on the beach, and he pried this thing off, and to me it was like something that came out of your nose. I mean, it was this gooey thing, and he slurped it down, and then he made us do it too. And I didn't love oysters right off the bat like my granddaughter did, but it just seems like a rite of passage.
It really does. I have a scar on my finger from shucking, and I'm very proud of that. I feel very proud that I know how to shuck an oyster living in Seattle. Well, thank you so much, Knute. We'll come back to you at the end when we do Q&A. So if anybody has questions for Knute, get them into the chat now, and we will come back to you in just a little bit. So we're going to move on to Bob Donegan. Hello, Bob. President of Ivar Seafood Restaurants and Chowder. Look at your bow tie. Will you tell everybody what the print on your bow tie is, since they can't see it up close?
Well, the salmon season is just about to start, so this is the first run of salmon on my tie.
Perfect. Do you know what species it is?
They're too small to tell, but they look like king salmon to me.
Okay. So just as we were kind of talking about in the intro, Ivar's opened in 1938 by Ivar Haglund. He was a folk singer, and then he opened Seattle's first aquarium on the pier, and people got hungry when they were at his aquarium. So he thought, if you like looking at fish, you're going to love eating fish. He didn't say that, but I just thought it was kind of a funny thing to serve fish in an aquarium. But that's how it started. He opened up a little fish shack, am I right? And that's where Ivar's began?
That's correct. In the southeast corner of then Pier 3, which is now Pier 54, the fish bar on the sidewalk is where he started. And because he grew up in West Seattle, do you know who taught him how to fry fish and chips?
I don't.
Seattle's original seafood restaurant was Alki Spud Fish and Chips.
Oh.
Frank and Jack Alger started Spud in 1935, and they were also West Seattle high school graduates, and they taught Ivar how to do fish and chips. So it all comes back together to the original landing place of people in Seattle, which is Alki Beach.
So my question is, how many things on that original menu still exist today? And are the recipes the same? Are you still making that same recipe of fish and chips that he learned back in the 30s?
It's identical, and his portion size for a piece of fish was 1.4 ounces. And our portion size for a piece of fish today is 1.4 ounces. His favorite chowder was red. He didn't have white chowder. The white chowder was developed after he died in the 90s, and the white outsells the red 20-1 today. But everything else on the menu is virtually the same because it's all largely fresh fish, unprocessed, just cooked in oil and served right there. The Dungeness Crab cocktail, the coleslaw is the same. The red chowder is similar. The white chowder is new.
I'm so surprised by that there wasn't white chowder until the 90s, because I think that's what most people think of when they think of clam chowder. Do you know how he got into the Manhattan version? Was that something that was popular in Seattle at that time?
Well, we don't call it Manhattan. We call it Clam Hatton because we're here on the West Coast. And we're not going to give credit to people in the Rotten Apple for good chowder.
And you never miss an excuse to use the word clam in any word.
That's exactly right. Stay tuned for some more.
Hey-o! Oh, God, I love a punter. Okay, so you had said that you can tell if someone isn't a local, I don't know if you meant to Seattle or just the Pacific Northwest, if they won't eat 3 particular types of fish. So what are these 3 fish that if somebody doesn't eat them, you can tell they're not from here?
Rachel, do you know the answer to this?
I do, but I'm going to pretend that I don't. No, I don't, Bob.
Oh,
What's the answer?
If you grew up locally, you love razor clams. And if you came from the Midwest or the East Coast, you don't like razor clams. If you grew up locally, like Skip, and you grew up eating shellfish, you like mussels, but if you didn't grow up here, you don't like them. And if you didn't grow up here locally, you don't like ling cod because it's too velvety and too oily. So when I'm in a restaurant and somebody gets something they don't like, we can tell in an instant if they didn't grow up here.
Huh. That's so interesting because when I heard the question framed, I thought the three would be gooey duck, which I call the penis of the sea, excuse me, sea urchin, and raw oysters. I feel like those have such intense textural, and the gooey duck just looks so weird that those are the three that locals like and know about.
So there's a terrific article that was published in Sports Illustrated in 1964 in which the writer interviewed Ivar about stalking, catching, and eating gooey ducks. And when we finish this, I'll send the link of it to KCTS 9 so they can post it to the website. It's hilarious how he describes catching gooey ducks and cooking them to eat them.
Yeah, part of being a local is learning how to say gooey duck. So a couple of your restaurants have been closed during COVID. I mean, for a year, right? Excuse me, a year they have been closed. Why did you decide to close up completely as opposed to doing takeout or outdoor dining? And when are you going to be open again? And tell people which restaurants are still not open.
So the seafood bars throughout the region are open. The stadium locations have been closed because there are no fans in stadiums. But on Sunday, September 27th, we closed Acres of Clams on Pier 54 and the Salmon House. And the reason for that is in downtown Seattle, normally we have 360,000 people working, and we have 1.2 million cruise passengers, and all the hotels are filled with convention visitors. But the Downtown Seattle Association estimates that only 10% of the downtown workers are coming to work. So that's 300,000 fewer lunch occasions a day. Acres of Clams is a huge restaurant, more than 700 seats, and it needs a lot of people every day to cover costs. So we're planning to reopen it in July. The Salmon House has a neighborhood around it, but with the university out of session, we decided that the costs were too high to keep it open. So that one will reopen on May 17th. And in the quiz tradition, Rachel, last summer during Corona, what percent of our takeout orders were made from a boat and picked up on the dock?
Oh, people could come get takeout from their boat. Is that what you're asking? What percentage?
Correct.
70%.
70 is the right answer. You are so smart. You've clearly done your research.
I didn't. I just guessed.
But where else in the country than Seattle could you get your fish delivered to you fresh on a boat, whether it's a paddleboard or a kayak or a sailboat or your water ski boat?
You can get it from a kayak even? I need to do that.
Indeed, and if you're learning how to sail over at the Seattle Yacht Club, the kids sail their opties over at the end of the week and they have lunch on the dock and then they sail them back over to the yacht club. We also get swimmers, and because Kenmore's float planes land on the lake, sometimes float plane pilots try to come over to the Salmon House and pick up orders as well.
So if you go to your website, you can actually see a map of Alaska and Washington, and you can see all the different places where you get your salmon from. And if you hold the mouse over it, you can see what kind of fish is from each region. So talk about when you're selecting your salmon, which is the iconic Seattle food, part of what we're talking about today. How do you select what you're going to serve? How big of a part of your business is salmon and to the region?
So in 2019, before Corona hit, we bought about 2 million pounds of seafood a year. And of that, about 300,000 pounds were fresh salmon. That map that shows the fisheries, tribes, boats that we buy from are people that we bought from for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And as you know, different salmon enter different rivers at different times. So often the first run of the year we get occurs right now when spring king salmon come into the Columbia River. They only come in every second or third year, and this is a year that they're not coming in. And then the big river that really kicks off the salmon season for the summer is the one that everybody on this call knows, and that's Copper River in Alaska, which is typically the second or third week in May. And that's why we're reopening the Salmon House that week, because everybody in Seattle wants Copper River grilled over an alder pit the way the natives did, which is how we do it at the Salmon House. And then that map or the website shows all the other rivers in Southeast Alaska and up in Central Alaska to Bristol Bay, where the runs occur and where we're getting fresh fish. Our goal is, during the season, 30 hours after the fish is in the water, we want it on your plate. That's how fresh it is. And with our friends from Alaska flying the Salmon 30 Salmon airplane filled with fish down, that's pretty easy to do.
So last question for you. What is the most iconic Seattle food to you? What do you think of when you think of Seattle food that you love the most?
Whatever's fresh, Rachel. So Skip and I were talking before the show. Fresh halibut from Ketchikan has come in the last couple of weeks. That's the best thing to have today. When the lingonberries come ripe, when the green beans come ripe, when the Yakima asparagus comes ripe, that's the best food to have, something that's fresh.
Yum. Okay, well, thank you so much, Bob. We'll come back to you at the end for Q&A. So if you have a question for Bob Donegan, president of Ivar's, make sure and write it in the comments, and we'll see you in just a little bit. Hi, Yenvy.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
All right. I am good. Yeah, we're like super buds now. Well, let me introduce you first. So this is Yenvy Pham. She is co-owner of Pho Bok, which is the city's first pho restaurant. Her parents opened. It's still open with so many locations. But this is the third time that I've interviewed Yenvy about her family's story and restaurant, because I think it's such a great story. But I was thinking today that I think I'm your personal autobiographer now.
You are. God, every time we talk, it's like I feel like for hours. We just hang out all day.
I know. We're going to have to condense it down into 10 minutes. I know. So, like I said, Yenvy's parents opened Pho Bok. People familiar know that the first restaurant is the boat in the ID. It's like an actual wooden boat that Yenvy filled me in. Her dad actually rescued. It was a float. It was a float in a parade. And so they opened up in 1982. But Pho came to Seattle earlier than that. So this is a story that I'd done for Cairo Radio with Yenvy before. So in 1974, a bunch of Vietnamese immigrants flew to California to immigrate here, and Governor Jerry Brown would not let them out of the plane. They were stuck on the tarmac. And Washington Governor Dan Evans got a call and he said, "This is insane. Send them up to Washington. Of course they can live here." So he started welcoming a lot of Vietnamese immigrants to Seattle, and that's how the population started to grow, and they brought their food with them. So Yenvy, I want you to tell, since we only have 10 minutes, the Cliff's Notes version of how your parents made their way to Seattle, because it took 4 attempts and 6 years for them to get out of Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. So how did they eventually get here?
Well, I think you said most of it. Long story short, my aunt is in Seattle. And so they were in the refugee camp in the Philippines when they finally were able to escape. And they came to Seattle. And here, they were in the projects in West Seattle. And they were for 6 months. My mom worked at, remember the Substand shops, like Substand 54, 49, like those back in the day. She worked in one Federal Way. And my dad worked at A La Francais in Pike Place Market as a night janitor. So they were just working like fast food, like graveyard shifts, and like working nonstop. And they were at church. We used to have the Vietnamese Catholic Church on, what street is it? On 12th, like really close to Little Saigon, like 2 blocks away. And they were doing their shopping at Viet Hoa at that time. And they passed the corner of Rainier and Jackson and saw this release for this small little shack. At that time, it was about 600 square feet. And right now it's about like double that size. Illegally done, by the way. At that time, it was They just like gathered money from the community. The community is really small but very supportive. Gathered money from their friends, borrowed money, went to the city. My dad was like, help me. And at that time, like Seattle government was just like public health, and we just like wanted to make it happen. And then they opened Cat Submarine, which is my mom's name, cat sub sandwiches, like alfalfa beans, turkey, roast beef. And they had a sandwich shop because that's what she thought, what Seattle wanted. And then at that time, it's been a few months, and then her friends would come, go shopping the weekends, and be like, we want something from Vietnam. Like, please make your pho, because at that time, or pho, at that time, my mom used to throw like these crazy parties for all the Vietnamese people, and she used to make like big pots of soups. And one weekend, she decided, okay, fine, I'll make pho for the weekend. And then before you know it, no one would order sandwiches anymore. Everyone asked for pho. And then within like 3 months or 4 months of opening, they changed the concept to pho, and then changed it to pho back because both my parents are from the north originally before they had to escape Vietnam in 1945 to the south. And that's how it happened. I feel like that was really long.
Yeah, so they were the first, and then they helped a lot of other people open restaurants as well, right? Yeah. You just said that's kind of something that in the community, everybody just helps each other.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, it's not a big deal because I think, I don't know, like, I feel like Vietnamese people are very entrepreneurial, and like everyone, it's so easy to open in Vietnam. Like you could have your house and live upstairs and have like your shop downstairs, like no big deal, And of course in Seattle, like right now it's not like that, but like maybe back in the day, it was easier to do that. And everyone has owned something in Vietnam. Like it could be as small as like fixing your tires to, or food wise, it's like one dish wonder. Like everyone focused on their one specialty, right? And that's how it went about. Yeah.
And so you said that at the restaurant because 700 bowls a day of pho pre-COVID, right? At each restaurant.
Well, like, it's so cheap. And then like, it's just like something that is easy to do. People are in and out, like it's fast casual. And, I like to feed the masses. I always say like, we're the Costco of pho. I still believe that right now.
So I want you to describe your perfect bowl of pho because everybody likes theirs a little bit different. You can mix and match, but you were like, go for it, girl. So tell everybody your perfect bowl of pho.
I think people get bored. It's so long. Okay, anyways, so I eat a small and I blanch my noodles for exactly 12 seconds. I put brisket, fatty brisket, which is like the fattiest part of the brisket, and meatballs and tendon. On the side, I have the rare sirloin steak that we use and a little bit of beef belly. And then I also have a side of vinegar, sugar, onions. And then on that, I put a little bit of sambal and a hoisin, a little bit of sriracha. And then on my soup bowl, it has a little bit of fatty broth that you skim on top. And then I add all that rare stuff into the bowl and I dip my meat into that mixture and eat. That's just my perfect bowl of pho.
It's a vegetarian's nightmare.
I know. No, my vegetarian pho is very good.
And so you have really picked up your parents' entrepreneurial spirit because not only, do you and your siblings own the pho bak restaurants, but you've gone on to open Hello M, which is this just really, really, really cool Vietnamese cafe in Saigon, where you actually go and source the coffee yourself in Vietnam. Did you end up opening a new place last weekend? I know you were supposed to a week or two ago.
That has been delayed. We're actually going to be across the street from Fair Start, and Lake View is my favorite French wine bar. That's going to be in May now. So I hope you guys are excited for that concept. It's going to be really fun too. But for Hello Am, it's still up and running. And talk about Seattle food. Like, I'm born and raised in Seattle. I was born at Swedish. And at Hello Am, I actually have a homage to everyone. Like I'm like so excited to be here because you see like Bob and Skip and everyone knows so much about Seattle. And we actually have a pepper smoked salmon banh mi that I get from Seattle Fish Guys. And then of course we have to have like a hot dog Seattle version. So I have like my hot dog Viet dog at Hello Am too, which is like definitely Seattle. So it's so cool to like see be here and like tie it all together with with our guests. Yeah.
Yeah. So later in the show, we're going to talk about the Seattle dog. So talk about what's in your hot dog banh mi, how it kind of is an echo of the Seattle dog, the Viet version.
Oh man, because like, growing up, like on Broadway, you go to Neighbors and the best food, like hot dog stands are in like Belltown and Capitol Hill. And like I grew up on the Seattle dog and with my fake ID, of course. And then, so mine is, of course, a Vietnamese baguette. And it has Vietnamese mayo, which is really, really heavily egg yolk, mayonnaise. And it has a Polish dog from Costco. And it has Laughing Cow cheese, which is cheese wedges that the only type of cheese we had in Vietnam. And so that's the only, like before I knew what cheese was, that's the only cheese I ate.
I love that cheese.
Yeah, I love that cheese. And then a pickle medley of carrots, cilantro, red onions, and jalapenos. But Viet dog is.
Yeah. So one more quick question before I let you go. So the new place that you're opening in May, you've been working really hard on the menu and coming up with new dishes that I've actually never seen anywhere in Seattle or even heard of. So could you highlight one of the dishes that you've come up with that is going to be new to people in the Viet food world? Did I put you on the spot?
Actually,
Sorry.
I do. No. I have two, which I'm really excited about. But for one of them is one of them is going to be like a Vietnamese Scotch egg. It's a very similar concept where it's Vietnamese like kind of sausage meat and it's braised in tomato sauce, and inside is actually a house cured salted egg that's been cured in the pho aromatics banh mi. And that's a very excited banh mi that I'm really excited
about. It's so clever.
about.
Yeah. And like I've asked everybody else, what to you is the most iconic Seattle dish?
Hello, Ivar's Clam Chowder.
Oh, nice.
Like I was like when he came in and talked to me, I was like kind of starstruck. I was like, oh. I was like, okay, wow. I'm like, God, yeah, clam chowder for sure. Like, I do think of clam chowder. Like every time I come home, like, I say clam chowder, and I do like the white one better than the red one. I'm sorry.
Maybe you and Ivers need to do some kind of collaboration. You need to do like a pho chowder.
That could totally work, actually.
I think that it could. My dream of fusion is to do a pho matzo ball soup where you have the pho broth and everything you'd normally put in it, but then you sink the matzo balls in and you let the broth absorb into the matzo balls. I think that would be so good.
We could totally do that. That'd be fun.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open our own little Jewish Vietnamese restaurant.
Oh my God, that'd be hilarious. Okay, why not?
Well, Yenvy, thanks so much for being here, and we'll come back to you at the end. So again, if you have any questions for Yenvy, anything about pho bok and pho in general, she'll be back at the end of the show for Q&A. All right, so we're going to talk about teriyaki, one of the staples of Seattle cuisine, with Naomi Tomke. She's a Seattle food writer, and she also wrote this article that went viral back in 2016 called "The Slow and Sad Death of Seattle's Iconic Teriyaki Scene." That was an article in Thrillist. Welcome, Naomi.
Hi.
Hi. So before we talk about the death, that's kind of the spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the birth. So 1976, Toshi, set the scene. How was teriyaki invented in Seattle?
So Toshi had come to the Northwest from Japan to wrestle in college. And he moved to Seattle and wanted to develop a restaurant where he didn't have to depend on anyone else, because he said he couldn't hire people that he could depend on. So we tried to find a way to make a quick Japanese inspired dish. And this is what he came up with.
Okay, so when I moved here 15 years ago and I noticed there were a lot of teriyaki places and people told me teriyaki was invented in Seattle. And I thought, I don't think so. I think it was invented in Japan. So can you clarify what's the difference between Japanese teriyaki and Seattle teriyaki?
So Seattle teriyaki, in terms of the cooking, is different from Japanese teriyaki, which is kind of just a light glaze that is put on after cooking seafood. Whereas Seattle teriyaki is like a hearty, kind of sweet marinade and cooking sauce. But it's also that Seattle teriyaki is a whole concept. It is this chicken with that charred, caramelized, sugary, sweet sauce on it. It's the fresh rice scooped out of the rice cooker into the styrofoam container. It's that wonderful salad that comes on the side. And it's all cheap and served super fast at a, casual lunch counter type place. And that whole concept is Seattle teriyaki, beyond just the difference between the sauces.
Yeah, and it really hits all those points where you have the sweetness and the crispness from the chicken, and then the soft rice, and then that dumb little salad that is way too good. Like, why is iceberg lettuce that good? It's so delicious. So it's kind of like the perfect meal.
It is.
Hot and cold.
It's a magical combination.
It is. So you grew up here. So this is something that to you was just a normal part of the culture. But you said that people who come from out of town don't recognize that, and people who leave town didn't realize it was such a big deal in our city.
Yeah. So there's this weird thing where if you grew up eating it, you lived in Seattle in your formative and young or broke years, this was where you ate because they were everywhere. And if you wanted a cheap, quick lunch, that's where you went. And so then you don't realize that it's not a type of store and dish that is everywhere until you leave Seattle. And then you have this other group of people that move here from out of town, maybe for jobs in the tech industry or whatever. And these shops, you just don't even see them, because if you aren't from Seattle and you're walking down the street and you see this sort of bland storefront that just says teriyaki and next door is neon lights flashing pizza or whatever, and you don't know what it is, you don't even know, it doesn't register. And so you kind of have the people who know it and the people who don't.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the piece that, when a lot of people started moving here for tech, Seattle actually had become a pretty known food city where it didn't used to be. So yeah, people were lured in by these restaurants like Crow. When I moved here, everything was one word for these restaurants, and, fancy foods and foams. And so to go get dim sum was still cool, but teriyaki wasn't really cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people dream of Seattle food and they think of oysters and salmon and sushi and whatever. And teriyaki just isn't that glamorous.
So when you wrote this piece, you weren't actually intending to write about the death of teriyaki. You were just writing about teriyaki. And during the course of writing it, places started to close down, and you looked into it. And in 2016, you noted that a third of the teriyaki restaurants had shut down. So why were they closing? And where are we at today?
Yeah, I mean, so I had set out to update a list of teriyaki places that I'd written and noticed that a lot of them had closed and dug into it. But the basic story is, it's partially a real estate thing. These are super cheap. They make their money on affordable meals. And part of it is a changing city. And you have all of these people that moved here when they were long past their days of needing a $5 teriyaki lunch. And so a lot of them moved to suburbs. A lot of them closed down. A lot of them, the proprietors aged out into retirement age, and their kids, they were immigrants and their kids found new jobs. It's not necessarily a story of the city, did their signature food dirty. We
didn't crush them.
It's how things change. So I dug into that and I wrote this piece, and it ended a little bit on a down note, but in the years since the article came out and the video that Thrillers followed up with went viral as well, and there's been a resurgence of second generation teriyaki, as I've started calling it. So there's a series of franchise outside of Seattle that have taken concepts and franchised Seattle restaurants into other places. And then there's also been a number of people who trained with teriyaki shops, old school teriyaki shops here, or grew up eating at them, or it was their parents' restaurant, that have come back and are now opening sort of a more modern teriyaki shop, one that fits with the city's current vibe and aesthetic.
Oh, good. So the numbers are up. So we're going to save teriyaki. Maybe.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I feel much better about it than I did when I wrote that article 5 years ago.
Good. Oh, good. And so where is Toshi now? What happened to Seattle's original teriyaki restaurant from 1976 that started in Queen Anne? Where is he now?
Yeah. So he ended up expanding immensely. He had 17 franchises at one point, and then there were a million imitators. You'll see Toshios and Yoshis and all of that. And then it got to be too much. He didn't like business as much as he liked cooking. He quit them all. He now has one single shop in Mill Creek, just him and his wife. And then also his son has, I think it's his son, a family member has taken his sauce and bottled that and is setting up at farmers markets in the Bay Area. But Toshi himself still doing the original version, and I think the best version.
Oh, you do? Out of any place in Seattle? Okay, so it's worth driving to Mill Creek for teriyaki?
That's what I do.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised to see on the website that we have one location in Mill Creek and then at a variety of farmers markets in San Francisco. So that makes sense. It's a family member, because I thought, well, that's an interesting concept. And I think it's actually the perfect pandemic food, because everybody's getting takeout, and there's so much takeout, we've all learned, that doesn't really work very well on the way home. And so I think that teriyaki, do you agree that it's a food Absolutely. That can make it home?
It is. Teriyaki is a food made for takeout. And it's a Seattle original. So I think we should all be out there supporting it, especially Toshi, but also the best teriyaki is often the closest one to you.
That's true. I have to say that's usually where I go, and you and I are both, kind of a little bit snobby sometimes, but I do just kind of go to anyone that I see when I want it. And it is always good.
Part of the charm.
And there was a recipe. I mean, like, people are still talking about Seattle teriyaki. Last year in 2020, Cook's Country published an article about Toshi's, and they included a recipe that they had come up with that they thought was close to his sauce. And I thought, this is not something you make at home. Like, you have to have that illegal, I may add, styrofoam container, because they're banned, with way too much food in it. And, you can't get those industrial little carrot shreds like you can when you get it to go.
No, Seattle style teriyaki is as much about those little corner teriyaki shops as it is about the food itself. Mm-hmm. And so you're never going to get that at home.
Thank you so much for being here, Naomi. Tell everybody what your book is so they can support you if they want a really good, all-encompassing seafood cookbook.
Yeah, so my book is the Pacific Northwest Seafood Cookbook.
Thank you, Naomi Tomke. I am curious what everybody's eating at home, because I hope that you prepared that you're either eating teriyaki or pho or seafood or a hot dog, because all of this is making me so hungry. Last but not least, we're going to talk hot dogs. Seattle dogs with Farshid Varamini. Hello, Farshid.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So you're the owner of Pioneer Grill Hot Dogs and the Gantry Public House. You've been in the hot dog biz since 1999. You opened with a single hot dog stand outside of the west entrance of what was then the Kingdom. So you were super old school. I want to know, how does one get into the hot dog business? Is this like, were you a little kid and you were like, when I grow up, I want to be the hot dog man?
No, I was going to be anything from an engineer to a architect to doctor and whatnot. Definitely hot dogs were not in the plan. I started working at a company that was right next to the Kingdom, and the owner was very gracious in actually letting me, on my time off from work, set up a hot dog cart. And that's where we got started.
Got it. So just for people who don't know, will you just walk us through what makes a Seattle dog? What's on it?
So Seattle dog is, to me, everything is fire grilled. So fire grilled sausage, we do a Polish sausage, fire toasted bun, of course, the cream cheese, and grilled onions, and they got to be grilled onions. And that's really it. And you could top it with, a lot of people will do the ketchup and sriracha, but we serve it, with the cream cheese and onions.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Do you still think it's a Seattle dog if you have that base, but you add to it? Because on Wikipedia, it says, grilled onions, but it says jalapenos, sauerkraut, grilled cabbage, scallions, mustard, barbecue sauce, and sriracha. Those are all options, it says.
That's not a Seattle dog. We being outside the stadium, we have a lot of people that come in from out of town. And that is an exact question we get every time is, what do you put on this? I always tell them, take that first bite with nothing on it. And if you don't fall in love there, add what you typically put on a hot dog. But you definitely got to, your first time, you definitely got to start with no condiments, just the cream cheese and onions.
So do you know anything about the history, how this came to be? How is this our hot dog?
So from what I know is, and the way I was actually, the idea was to do the Seattle dog was that it started from a cart from a gentleman. I don't remember his name, but he was doing.
I know his name.
You
It's
know his
Hadley
name.
Long.
Yeah. Yes, and he was he was a bagel guy, and of
Mhm.
course bagels and cream cheese. You know what better combination? But yeah, he was the one who is said to have originally started it, and that's and for some reason in my head I remember having it at Pike Place Market, but I was young, so
Ah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I researched this a few years ago, and I interviewed who was a Seattle food critic at the time. Now she's in South Carolina. Her name's Hannah Raskin, and she said that they think it's 1988. That guy that you mentioned, he was a bagel man, and I don't know why, he was selling bagels late at night, like when hot dog carts should be out, and people were like, nobody wants a bagel, dude. This is Pioneer Square. It's 2 a.m. What are you doing? And they requested hot dogs. So the way that the story goes is that he just started putting a hot dog on the bialy that he had that was kind of like a longer shaped. And then it went from there because it had cream cheese on it. But when other people copied it, they got rid of the bagel because that's kind of a lot of bread for a hot dog. And they went for the bun. Yeah. So when you were growing up, you grew up in Seattle, right?
Yeah. Well, I came here when I was 7 years old, but most of my
life. Good enough. So do you remember eating Seattle dogs when you were a kid, or when was your introduction?
Not when like most people, it was actually when I was of age and we were coming outside of nightclubs, to be honest. I do vaguely remember as a kid doing a bagel dog with cream cheese, and in my memory it was in Pike Place Market, but I was young. But my first Seattle dog was definitely outside of the bars in Pioneer Square.
It's interesting because when that food writer, she actually contacted Philadelphia Cream Cheese and asked, do you know about this? And they didn't even know about the Seattle dog. So it's something that's really insular. How do people react when they come to your stand? Is it a big divide between locals and people from out of town, their opinions on the Seattle dog?
Well, the locals know what a Seattle dog is. But when we do get people from out of town, it's always a really cream cheese on a hot dog. And my thing is, and for 23 years almost has been, if you don't like it, return it. We'll give you a hot dog you like. And no one has yet to return one. So,
wow.
Yeah, 23 years, not a single person. So anyone listening or watching, don't be the first.
And so since you're near the stadiums, is that the only spot where you've run your carts, or have you been other places in the city?
No, we've done the whole nightclub stuff. I have actually two outside of just outside of CenturyLink Field now. They're about 200-300 feet apart. And we've done a lot of catering. We do corporate lunches, and we do a lot of birthday parties and things like that. So we've been all over. We've gone as far east as Lake Chelan.
Oh, okay. I'm curious the difference between the customers. I'm sure there's a difference between a Sunday Seahawks fan and a 2 a.m. Capitol Hill person. What's the difference of your consumers? And also, how do you handle this? Because you're mostly dealing with loud, drunk people. Do you have a personality for that?
I love it. I love the people. We've had, since I started, I have not stepped off the grill since I started for a Seahawks game. We have people that literally have, from day one, it's their ritual to come before every game to have a hot dog, mostly a Seattle dog, before they go in the game. And a lot of them will even eat it on the way outside. I won't differentiate bar crowds and Seahawks fans because to me, they're all the same.
Okay.
Mariner fans are a little tamer for the most part, not always, but I enjoy everyone that comes up. Everybody that has tried a Seattle dog has either fell in love or it's one of their favorites. My kid won't put them down. I mean, it's definitely his favorite. So, fans are fans before the game or after the game. It's all the same.
So that is the known Seattle dog, but are there other combos? Because you see what everybody puts on that thing for 23 years. Are there other common combinations that you've seen that seem to kind of stand out?
So we do what we call a PG dog for Pioneer Grill. And all we've done is take a Seattle dog and add bacon and grilled peppers. So that's our take on it. I have personally, since I run a hot dog cart, I have not eaten off another hot dog cart in a long time. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the other guys are doing. I haven't seen anything. Because except for, when you go to other states, they do their versions of hot dogs or whatnot. But we do the bacon. The bacons have been a pretty big hit so far.
So hot dogs are one of those foods like pizza. There are so many regional differences and people have really strong opinions. Have you traveled around the country much trying different kinds of hot dogs? And if so, what do you like? How do you think Seattle ranks amongst, New York, Chicago?
I'm actually sitting in New York right now. We came out here as a family for a little spring break trip. And I've actually mentioned the Seattle dog to actually when I told one of the vendors out here that we were from Seattle, he actually knew what the Seattle dog was, which was very shocking. He said, "Oh, Seattle, the Seattle dog." So it does come out here. I will try every hot dog everywhere I go. It's it's research as they call it in the industry, I guess. So Chicago dogs, I've done that. New York, you go to Portland. I mean, everywhere we've been, if I see a hot dog cart, I got to try it.
Have you had one in New York yet this weekend?
Not yet. We just got in today, so we'll walk around after this and see what we can find.
So what to you is the most iconic Seattle food? You've lived here your whole life. What do you think of when you think of Seattle food?
Oh God, listening to all the speakers tonight, everything on that list is amazing. I was shocked. Actually, I didn't know teriyaki started in Seattle. That's one of my favorites for sure. But clam chowder, pho, all that. That's who could go wrong? I'll eat it all.
Maybe all in a hot dog. You could put clam chowder in there. That wouldn't be bad, actually.
You never know.
I think that'd be good. Do you use one of those cream cheese guns?
I do always. Yes, that's it's kind of one of our draws to our cart is we're one of the only ones down in the stadium area that use it. So makes it easier. It's more fun to watch, and we do it in front of the people so they get to see us put the cream cheese on.
I was going to say, is it as fun as it looks? Because I always used to see them at Taco Bell when I was a kid with the sour cream gun, and I wanted one for Hanukkah, and I never got one. So if you ever want to get me a gift, I want a cream cheese gun.
I will remember that. Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely fun. We used to do it the old fashioned way with a spreader, but the cream cheese gun, you feel like you're like a cowboy in the old West. You got a cream cheese gun on your right side. Every time they order, you bring it up, and
you need a holster.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah, that might be our next gimmick.
We'll do that for you. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move to the Q&A now. So if anybody has any questions, any hot dog questions, we're going to get those in just a moment. Okay, let's see. Let's look at these questions here. One of the ones that I liked that was submitted ahead of time is to everybody. What is your favorite middle of the night quick fix from your personal kitchen? Or I'm going to add a twist if you'd rather. So what's either your favorite midnight snack or like a weird combination that you put together when no one is watching that you really would prefer nobody know about? So anybody who wants to go first.
So there's a cheddar cheese spread that's made in Wisconsin called Merks, MERKT''S. It's a sharp cheddar, and if you slather that on a sourdough pretzel in the middle of the night, there's nothing better than that.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
You cut a Honeycrisp apple into sections, and you take your Merks cheese pretzel with apple. It's a nice combination.
Mm-hmm. Yenvy, I know you have something. You must.
Hey, my go-to is if you ever go to the Asian markets and look for Mama Me instant ramen. Is from Thailand, and get the tom yum flavor. And then I make that, and I go to Seattle Market in Beacon Hill, and they have these varieties of fish balls. And my favorite one is filled with fish roe egg and eggs. And I make that all the time.
I actually bring those Mama Nudes camping. That's like my go-to camping meal, like those Mama Nudes. They're so good. So yeah, we're going to move on. Farshid, what is your secret weird middle of the night dish?
You know, I'm going to be a little boring. My secret middle of the night dish is Frosted Flakes.
Ooh, that's good.
That's my favorite go-to if hungry in the middle of the night. Nothing special there, just easy.
Well, I thought you were going to say a hot dog, and so you definitely weren't that boring. You went with Frosted Flakes.
If I was out, maybe yes, but I'm getting up there in age, and 2:00 in the morning is way out there for me.
So, Bob, a question about Ivar's. Do you ever share recipes of your cornbread and butter?
Indeed, we do. We put them both in our cookbook that we published on our 75th anniversary. And the salmon house, depending on the season, sometimes has honey hives on the roof of the salmon house. And that honey gets mixed with butter and lavender.
Ooh.
And it sometimes is served on the cornbread muffins if it's a good year.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so y'all got to get the Ivar's cookbook. This one's for you, Yenvy. The question is, what do you think about restaurants that have tried to fancy up pho, like Babar and others like that?
I don't think Babar fancy. They just make it really pretty.
I was thinking that too.
Really, yeah, they're actually really traditional. Actually, I love Eric and Teresa. And I think they're really good at presentation. But I think fancy pho, like Kobe beef to like lobster. Oh my God, like I went to Basa for their lobster pho special and it was amazing. Like, I think, you know, for me, I'm not a purist at all. And so like, I like to see the modernization. I like to see tradition. Whatever floats people's boat, man, it makes you tick.
I hope, and the boat you're referring to is the pho bok boat, of course. Yes. Well, I think that's actually a debate that's come up a lot, that's made a lot of people upset, is sometimes people say, you know, it's fancy pho, why are you charging so much? And it's because they're using really quality ingredients. So, you know, you have to pay for what you buy, you know, I mean, there's different price points. And I'm curious, you know, you must buy in huge bulk because, you know, pho bok manages to keep pho at a really affordable price. But you have different price points too at your different restaurants. So I think that people need to remember that, you know, if you go to Babar and they're using local meat, it is going to be more expensive. So maybe it's not fancy. It's just you're paying for what you're eating.
Exactly. I agree.
Let's see. So Farshid, you kind of answered this already, but can you talk again about what kind of hot dogs you use? The question is, do you use pork, beef, turkey, a blend of meats? I'm sure you have a variety.
Well, we do have a variety on our menu, but for the Seattle dog, we use a beef and pork Polish sausage. Originally, when we started, it was the Costco Polish. Now we use a Cloverdale, which we like a little bit better sometimes. But definitely a Polish sausage, more flavor. And some people, you know, if you want an all beef, you can always substitute. But classic Seattle dog is a Polish sausage.
Okay, Bob, is it true that Ivar's keeps the Kraken in a pen underneath the restaurant on the waterfront?
If you look online, you will see the reason that Pier 58, the waterfront pier, collapsed was the Kraken had crawled up on it and pulled it into the water. So no, we don't have it. It's out in the middle of Puget Sound somewhere.
Okay, that's the answer. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. If you are in the audience, please go eat at all of these restaurants. Check them out. Of course, everything is delicious and everything is so Seattle. So thanks for joining us today. You can check out the Foods That Made Seattle episode of Mossbacks Northwest on kcts9.org, along with all 4 seasons of the show. Of course, please donate, make a donation. Same thing, kcts.org. And have a wonderful sunny weekend with lots and lots of good Seattle food. Bye, everyone.